Hi, you've reached the UNEASYsilence video tutorial on the new way to install Windows XP on your Mac. You may remember this video. It's outdated. So a big I'm sorry to all you New York Times readers. Today Apple introduced a method, a new easier method to install Windows XP on your Mac. It's called Bootloader. And for Bootloader to work, you need to make sure your system is completely up to date, including firmware and software. So you need to go to the Apple menu and run your software update and be sure you're running system 10.4.6. So go in and install those updates if you don't already have them. Now that we have the latest software installed on the computer, we're going to go to Apple's website and download the latest firmware. For Bootloader to work, Apple released a new special firmware for MacBook Pros, Mac Minis, and Intel iMacs. These are for Intel machines only. So navigate to apple.com, click on the Support tab, then click Downloads, and choose the appropriate firmware download for the machine that you're operating. In this case, I'm working with a Mac Mini. So download and install the firmware as the instructions say. That is a shot of the firmware installation screen. Now that the firmware has been updated, we're going to go back into Safari, navigate back to Apple's website, and download Bootloader. So we're going to go to www.apple.com, click on macOS 10, scroll down until we see the Boot Camp public beta. We're going to click on that, and then we're going to click on Download Now. Fill out the required information for Boot Camp, filling in your email address, what machine you're going to use, and reading the terms and conditions. For the purposes of this video, I've already pre-read the terms and conditions, but I highly recommend that you read the terms and conditions before you download this product. And now we're going to download Boot Camp. Once Boot Camp is done downloading, Safari is going to ask if you're going to auto-open the DMG file. We're going to allow Safari to do that. It's going to open up an installer. We're going to quit out of Safari, and we're going to double-click on the bootcampassistant.pkg. Please, once again, read the instructions over carefully so you fully understand what Boot Camp is doing to your machine and that you meet the minimum system requirements. After reading that over, we're going to continue and agree to the software license agreement. We're going to pick the volume that we want to install Boot Camp on, put in our user password, if we can type it in correctly, and install it. Boot Camp loads in an amazingly short amount of time. It's a very small application. So once it's done, we're going to close the installer, and we're going to close out of the DMG because we don't need that anymore. And we're going to go into the Utilities folder by going to the Go menu and Utilities. Double-click on the Boot Camp Assistant application. It'll launch. You're going to get a warning that this is preview software. Apple's really going out of their way to reinforce that this is preview software. But we're going to install Boot Camp anyway. Once Boot Camp launches, it's going to give you an option if you want to burn Macintosh drivers to a CD. We're going to go ahead and do that. The biggest problem with the XOM hack before was finding the appropriate drivers that are necessary to run your Intel Macintosh. Apple has gone to the expense and great length to make sure that they write an appropriate and actually quite easy installer CD that we're going to see later in this video. I inserted a blank CDR and we're going to burn the drivers to a CD. Once the CD is done burning, it's going to ask how you want to partition your hard drive. I'm going with the default. But you can use the little slider back and forth to say how much macOS 10 and how much Windows XP gets. This partition utility that Apple uses does not format your computer. Matter of fact, from the several times that I've done this test, it doesn't seem to affect your data on your hard drive at all. So allow the assistant to repartition your hard drive. Then, once the partitioning is done, you're going to get your Windows XP Professional Service Pack 2 disk, and you're going to insert it into the computer. It's important that you buy a retail copy of Windows XP Service Pack 2 for this installation. If you borrow someone else's CD, it's illegal. You must go to the store and purchase a Windows XP Professional SP2 CD. Insert that CD and start the installation. Now we're going to go through a standard Windows XP installation. Huh? What? Oh, we're back. Sorry it took so long. Windows does take forever to install. I'm taking a scan off the computer monitor because we don't have drivers installed yet. So what I'm doing is I'm inserting that disk we made previously on the Macintosh that contains all the Intel drivers for Windows XP. And we're going to go through the installation process. It's a couple minute long process that requires a lot of user intervention. You're going to start up the installer, which automatically starts once you install that CD, and then the installer is going to automatically install all the necessary drivers for all the missing hardware in Windows XP. Occasionally it's going to pop up an error message saying that the driver is not signed to work with Windows 2000 Windows XP. We're just going to hit the Continue Anyway button as stated in Apple's instructions. Sometimes they hide behind the installer window, so you need to click down in the taskbar and say Continue Anyway, and continue with the installation. One really cool extra thing that I want to cover before this video comes to an end is Apple installed a special control panel called Startup Disk. So to get there, you go to Start, Control Panels. I'm going to switch to Classic View, and I'm going to choose the Control Panel Startup Disk. That allows you to tell Windows if you want to boot into Mac OS X. Also, if you're familiar with the old installation method, it used to give you a logo in the beginning to choose between Windows and Mac. If you still want that option, immediately when the machine starts up, you press and hold the Option key, and you'll see a screen similar to this one right here. And you can choose what volume you want to boot into. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions, email us at tips@uneasysilence.com.